Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Raw and the Real with
Nadia.
Nadia and Tanya. So today's segment, I don't know, do we call them segments, Nadia? I don't even know. So we're going to call it a segment for the sake of
It's going to be a
wording.
segment.
Today, this is what we've launched in our previous videos, our bio mom versus adoptive mom. And our launch date is today, February 1st. So yay, it's like our wedding day. And if you don't know what that means, go back to the previous video. Sitting here today with is really surreal for me because it's our baby. It's something that we've nurtured and we've watered and we've maintained and we've taken care of for over 2 years. It is a sensitive topic. It is a big topic. It affects every single one of us in the FASD community and community is the only way I can put it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is probably one of the biggest topics in our world with such a stigma.
It is.
And so we called it Bio Mom versus Adoptive Mom. Today's our launch day. Thank you for joining with us. Here we are, Nadia. So why the verses?
Oh,
Can you take us through that?
the verses. And I think that throughout our conversation, we had so many conversation, Tanya and I, that were like, this is a challenging conversation. I think that's one of the things I appreciate about our friendship is that we never like, oh, I'm going to step away from that's a touchy subject. We shouldn't talk about this. We talked about everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a touchy subject. And it is a subject that depending who you're sitting with, they kind of pin us against each other. They kind of say, the bio moms are a certain way. It's their fault that the child has a FASD. This is the diagnosis that we have someone to blame. So and when it is human nature when something, I'm going to say drastic, happen in your life, it's easier to get over it if you can blame something or someone with it. And here we are, the people to blame. And that's kind of how I say it. And then at the same time, they're blaming the adoptive moms, not for not being good parent, but saying that they're not the real parent because they didn't have the child in the womb, and it's not the same thing. And it's funny how they separate us in two groups, saying, oh, well, the bio moms are this way and the adoptive moms are this way, right? So we went for the verses because this is how people are seeing us. They are really putting us in two categories. And this is one of the great things we found out when we started talking to each other is the amount, we're going to say it. It's the amount of stigmas that was there between the both of us.
And judgment.
And,
oh, I judged you.
Yeah.
Oh, I judged you.
It's okay.
As an adoptive mom, I judged you. And I'm like, and I remember our first conversation. And I'm like, I cannot believe that I am so connected to a bio mom. Like it blew my mind that we had such a connection.
I am that lovable. No.
You are that lovable. But yeah.
But it's true. And we connected. It's like we're so different, but we're the same. We really are the same. And so I think I'm going to start with saying the bio side story.
Yeah.
Because I want you to come up with the stigmas and the things that you judge me afterwards, because I loved it. I'm going to share
and I'm going to be honest. And that's
I know.
And the thing is, though, being honest and us tackling this, Nadia, that's why we came up with the raw and the real.
Yes.
Because that's who we are. We're raw, we're real, and we make mistakes and we say things that we shouldn't say sometimes. And our lives are messy. And I'm going to use a phrase from our colleague.
Oh, yes.
Out in Moncton. And she said, it's the only diagnosis that comes with so much dirt.
I love that sentence. She was so right on the dot.
So having said that, it was just like we have all of this mess, all of this dirt, and we have this stigmas and all the judgments, and yet such a magical connection. And that was my biggest lesson in my meeting you, was the biggest lesson into learning more about the fetal alcohol, learning more about my son's brain. So I'm going to let you share your bio story, and then afterwards I'm going to openly and bluntly rawly
Bluntly.
share my judgments that I had against the bio moms.
So, and I'm gonna keep it as brief as I can, but I like to explain my stories like from the beginning, because like I said, we like to judge. And every time I start telling my story, I say that I got pregnant when I was 18 years old. And then a lot of people go, oh, okay, she was 18. And there's the next judgment. Now I'm not the bio mom anymore. I was the immature young girl, right? So either way, it comes with a judgment. But I was 18 working 3 jobs, and I did not have the time to go out and party. I was working 7 days a week. And I just wanted to prove that I could make it on my own. Like I was very, I want to say responsible for that age. I still had a lot of maturity, but still. And I was in a relationship where we never had alcohol in the house. And I want to be clear on that, because that was a big thing at 18, like living on our own for the first time. I had no alcohol in the house. So eventually, and I was on my birth control, and I was working. And one day I had a throat infection. I was put on antibiotics. And the same week, I told my doctor that I was stressed, and he put me on antidepressants. Now, looking back, we should have looked at the amount of hours I was working, but instead we gave me pills to see if we could fix that. So eventually I started feeling nauseated, and I was really tired. And a lot of people were like, and I went to see my pharmacist and my doctor, and they were like, oh, those are side effects of your antidepressants. Because I was one of the cases that still had her periods for the first few months.
Okay.
So I had no other signs but those 2 symptoms, which are very common signs of antidepressants when you start them off. They're also the first signs of pregnancy, but I had no other signs. No one had told me that my antibiotic could stop my birth control from working.
Okay.
And this is how it happened. So my birth control was not working anymore, and I had no clue. So fast forward a few weeks later, eventually I started gaining weight, and that was an extra sign. And I was like, huh. So then I took a pregnancy test, and I know, plot twist of the story, I was pregnant. So
Yeah.
I did the test the following week. I went to see my doctor, and by the time I saw my doctor, I was 12 weeks pregnant. So I found out I was pregnant at 11 weeks of pregnancy. And the first thing I said to my doctor is, oh, I went out drinking. I actually told my doctor, I wasn't sure what FASD was at 18, I won't lie, especially 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was.
But I didn't know that substances during pregnancy was not something you should do. And I said, I went out drinking twice with my friend. And she was like, oh, it was only twice. It doesn't count. Right?
Yeah.
So straight off the bat, it came off as it was nothing. So I went out with my friends at 8 weeks and 10 weeks of pregnancy. And when my baby was born, because he has no facial features, I still remember the 3-week follow-up. And she saw him and she went, look, he's completely normal. He's fine. So we didn't look into FASD for a long time because of that. The stigmas that followed us with that was incredible. And people don't look also at the other end, like the other side of this, where my family had a really hard time to accept that it was a diagnosis of FASD because they knew I wasn't drinking. They knew I was not a drinker. So they said, well, we see people that drink almost throughout the entire pregnancy, and it doesn't happen. You drink twice. And I always remind people, yes, but genetics are really important. As the vulnerability of the baby of the fetus is very important in this. I know people that go on the highway and they drive 160 all the time. They never have a car accident. Someone drives 95, there's a patch of ice, the road was more vulnerable, and an accident happens, right? Yep. So we got to take that into consideration. So that's my story, and a very tiny bit of the stigma when it came to having a hard time to accept it also, because it was not a big amount in that sense. But I'm really curious. Go ahead. Judge me. Judge me, Tanya.
So, and now my side with that is with the being an adoptive parent. My late husband and I, we went through the whole road of, we met, married, bought a house, and we thought that was all we were very traditional, right? And then the next thing comes baby and a baby carriage kind of thing. And that didn't happen so easily. And I'm just going to fast forward it really quickly through. And so it didn't happen traditionally. And we went through the fertility clinics and we had years of that. And if you're going through that, then I'm telling you, you are having a glass of wine or two. And never once did the doctor say, don't have a glass of wine, don't have that beer. You know, make sure you're taking your fulvic acid, make sure you're making your appointments and you're going through your treatments for the inseminations and all of that. But never once did they say not to consume alcohol. And so I joke, and I joke now because we use humor for everything, is the fact that I was always destined to be a mom of a child with FASD. It was always my destiny. It just didn't come to the way that I had thought. So then we fast forward a few years and we gave up on going through the fertility clinic and we started into the road of adoption. And after we had one failed adoption, we went through a second adoption. And that was when our son came to us right from birth. And he was absolutely perfect in every sense of the way. He had a small head though, and he had a small weight and etc. So we had all of those infant characteristics.
Yeah.
And he had the facial features, but we just assumed his face was so different because of his size. He was petite. He was premature. He had like every check. And then after and I remember it distinctly. It was like the 25th hour. It was like a light switch went off in him. And this amazing, beautiful, small bundle of joy has now turned into this child that was you couldn't console him. He had no suck pattern. And so then we are getting into more, what's the word? Like more characteristics or more symptoms of FASD, which we didn't even know what FASD was at the time. And then if we fast forward to when he was diagnosed, so up to the point of diagnosed, he had 4 diagnoses before his FASD diagnosis, and nothing seemed to fit. So then when a behavioralist walked in to a session we were having, and she looked at, she's like, oh, he's not autistic, he's FASD, send him to Moncton, which is now for the NBA FASD Center of Excellence that we were both community coordinators for. And we went through our clinic and he was diagnosed with FASD with sentinel facial features. And so he is part of that less than 10% population. And it was in that moment in that chair that I felt like violence, like the judgment, like how could you do this? How could you harm a child?
Yes.
Shame on you. Charges should be against you. You harmed a child, right?
Of course.
And now I'm here left to raise this little boy and to kind of put him back together after you broke him, right?
That's right.
And then if we go to the part of my story where I had professionals in our life after my husband's death, and Ben was, my son was so high needs and so violent and aggressive, and some of the symptoms that comes with having an individual with FASD, that I had professionals tell me, well, Tina, you didn't break them. You can't fix them. Yeah. And there is no point in you giving up your life raising a child that's not really yours. He's not your real child. You don't have to mend him. There's no fixing this. And then when we met, I'll never forget it. And because I wanted, as we said in the previous video, I was really shocked.
Very conflicted about.
I was conflicted because I have such a connection.
I like her.
Right? I like her. We have such a connection.
Yeah.
And here you are, a bio mom. And then when you shared your story with me, about your first son, and then and how he was diagnosed, and then we were talking about your second son who has some health conditions and some issues. Yeah. And I instantly went to, well, okay, you're going through all this testing. Now, did you not think about just getting him tested for FASD? It would only make sense. You have one child who's got fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Wouldn't it make sense that your second child has fetal alcohol?
And you know, that was such a hard thing to make people understand. And I'm glad you bring it up, because my first pregnancy was not planned.
Okay. My
second was. And even though it was planned, my second child was born with 4 heart defects, and he had 5 open heart surgery by the age of 3 years old. He had his first 4 before the age of 10 months old. That created some lack of oxygen to his brain, which created some his own diagnosis, right? So he's on the autism spectrum, very functional, symptomatic cerebral palsy with very severe ADHD.
Yep.
I know you're surprised. You are shocked. But I would go to people and they would ask me, so did you have any substances during this pregnancy? And I would say, no. I was like, no alcohol? No. Are you sure? Yes. It's just that we saw your conferences and we know you drank for the first one. So we're going to put it in the maybe pile. So it took me an extra 5 years to get my youngest one diagnosed when I was never scared to have the conversation about my alcohol consumption about my first one. I've never tried I've never not said it. I was always very upfront about it. But my second one was planned. And even though I was completely honest, people didn't believe me anymore anyway.
Yeah. Such a stigma, right? Such a judgment. And I mean, I was in that category. And I think that's how education and understanding and why we're doing videos and segments like this and why we've nurtured this for so long is because it's such a big topic and it's so sensitive that we have to make sure that we do our part in stopping those judgments and those stigmas. We do have to wrap this up, unfortunately, because of time and all of the powers of be. But before we wrap it up, the important thing that I really want to say is that as an adoptive mom, I wouldn't be able to be on this journey with my son and know what motherhood and experience motherhood and be that mom without having a bio mom. So for me, now that I have the education and I have the way of seeing it, I'm thankful for my bio mom of my son. And thank you. And I appreciate you. And I love you as the bio mom. And this is a topic, Nadia, I can see that we're going to come back to over and over again. And we are going to be able to have open discussions. Our hope is that this will grow and that we're going to be able to have open discussions with all of you of offering Q&As and open discussions. And that invitation is going to be out. It's just about trying to figure out how to do it. But first start is having a conversation.
It is. So I think coming back to the title to finish the wrap is how instead of going bio mom versus adoptive mom, we really want to go just mom versus the stigma, just us against the world, because that's sometimes how it feels,
It's
right?
true.
And it shouldn't be just moms against everyone, is that we're starting there. Get on board with us. We want to break those stigmas. We have to stop the judgment.
Yeah.
Let's switch that versus to something else. Right?
Yeah.
If you have any comments, don't forget to put in there. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and to put the follow button for next video that's coming out. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye for now.